The studio lights were hotter than usual. Not in temperature, but in pressure. The cameras were in place. Makeup retouches had stopped. The countdown on the monitor hit 5, then 4, then 3. Love. Oprah sat tall in her chair. The queen of talk, her smile as sharp as her questions. The audience had filled every seat, but their energy felt more like a courtroom gallery than a cheering crowd. Everyone was waiting for the moment. They all knew it would come. Across from her sat Denzel Washington, calm, upright, his fingers gently locked together on his lap. He wore a charcoal gray suit, tailored and perfect, but it wasn't the fabric that made him look strong. It was his silence, his stillness, as if the chaos of the world couldn't touch him. They exchanged greetings, and for the first 10 minutes, everything followed the expected path. A few laughs, stories from Denzel's latest film, reflections on his early life. But Oprah's tone began to shift. The crowd noticed it first in her eyes. Her posture stiffened. Her smile faded by degrees. The questions came sharper. "You talk about faith a lot," she said, her voice smooth but loaded. "But some people say faith is just a crutch. Something actors lean on to make their image look cleaner." Denzel didn't flinch. Not even a blink. "Some even say it's performative," she continued. "That your belief is more about public branding than personal truth." The room went still. The studio crew paused. Producers looked at each other offstage. The question wasn't on the approved script. But Oprah had power. She didn't need approval. Denzel leaned forward slightly, his voice deep and steady. "Are you asking me if my faith is fake?" Oprah smiled, but not warmly. "I'm asking if your God helps you only when the cameras are rolling." A low gasp from the audience. Then silence. What she didn't know was that this moment wasn't catching Denzel off guard. He had felt it coming. The energy in the room, the buildup of tension, it was all too familiar. Hollywood called it a hard-hitting interview. Denzel called it spiritual warfare. He looked straight at her. Not as a celebrity, not as a man under attack, but as a witness. And then he said the 7 words that froze the room. "I don't act when I pray, Oprah." The silence was immediate. Raw, not a dramatic pause, a spiritual one. The kind that swallows sound and breath and ego. Oprah blinked. The moment caught her. She had prepared counters, rebuttals, clever transitions, but those 7 words weren't just a comeback. They were a judgment. "What do you mean?" she asked, this time her voice smaller. "I mean," Denzel said, "some people perform. Faith, I don't. I pray in secret. I pray when I'm broken. I pray when no one's watching, not for applause, not for power, but because it's the only way I survive this town." The camera zoomed in slowly. Not planned, the cameraman did it on instinct. "You ever feel like you're being tested, Oprah?" Denzel continued. "Not on stage, not in interviews, but in your soul." She looked at him differently now. Not as a guest, but as someone she couldn't read. And Oprah could read anyone. Until now, but she tried to recover. "So your faith, it's helped your career?" "My faith," Denzel said, pausing just enough to make the room lean in, "is the reason I still have a career." Then came a twist no one saw coming. "I almost walked away from Hollywood once," Denzel said. "Years ago, at the peak. Because I heard a voice. Not from a manager, not from a friend. From inside. Telling me, if you stay on this path without your faith, you'll lose everything." The audience was holding its breath. "What stopped you?" Oprah whispered. Denzel reached into his inside coat pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small folded paper. He opened it with care, revealing a handwritten note, faded, worn, edges curled. He held it up. "This was written by my mother the day I left for Los Angeles," he said. It said, "Son, if you ever forget who gave you your gift, you'll lose it. Stay close to God or stay out of the spotlight." Gasps. Some audience members put hands over their mouths. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Oprah leaned back. Her expression softened. Her next words weren't a challenge. They were curiosity wrapped in respect. "Can I read it?" Denzel nodded. He handed it to her, and as she read it silently, the cameras zoomed in once more. Not on Oprah, not on Denzel, but on the tears sliding down her cheek. The studio had changed. The energy wasn't confrontational anymore. It was holy. And just when the audience thought the moment had reached its peak, a low, rising murmur came from backstage. Someone from the network was panicking. The feed had gone viral. Within minutes of Denzel's 7 words, 3 networks were scrambling. His name was trending worldwide. Not because of scandal, but because of truth. And yet Denzel sat still. Quiet. Faithful. The producers were now debating something live. Should they cut the segment early? They were too late. A woman from the front row stood up. She looked no older than 40. Hands trembling. Voice shaking. "Mr. Washington," she said, barely loud enough for the mic to catch. "My son was in a dark place, and he heard you speak once about God. And it saved him. He's here today, alive, because of your faith." Denzel didn't react the way celebrities usually do, with a hug or a quote or a camera glance. He bowed his head, closed his eyes, and whispered a prayer, in a studio built for performance. The realest moment had just happened off script. And Oprah? She looked at the woman, then at Denzel, then at the paper in her hands, and for the first time in her entire career, she had no more questions, but the story was far from over, because backstage, a phone was ringing, a very important one, and the person on the other end was not happy, not with Oprah, not with Denzel, but with what had just been revealed on live television. Something powerful people wanted buried, and the real battle was about to begin. The phone kept ringing, long, insistent. Not like a friend calling to congratulate. This was different. A kind of ringing that carried weight, pressure, fear. Backstage, Oprah's executive producer, Max Taylor, picked it up. He was pale by the 3rd word. The voice on the other end was calm, but ice cold. "Shut it down, now," Max whispered. "It's live. We can't pull the plug or you'll lose more than just your job." Click. He stood frozen. The control room buzzed with static voices and flashing signals, but he couldn't hear any of it. He turned toward the set and saw Denzel still seated, quiet, unmoved. Oprah, holding the note, her eyes locked on the words as if they held more truth than the entire studio combined. She hadn't spoken in a full minute, and that silence, on live television, was louder than any headline. "Fade to black," Max ordered, but just before they could cut the feed, Denzel stood. "I need to say one last thing," he said gently, as if speaking not to the room, but to something larger, deeper. Oprah looked up. "This platform you've built," Denzel said, "it's not just yours anymore. It belongs to the people. The ones who are watching right now with tears in their eyes, hoping that truth still matters." Oprah nodded once. The camera stayed rolling. And outside the studio, the world was watching. From bedrooms, hospitals, classrooms, hotel lobbies, prison rec rooms, the feed had spread far beyond what any of the producers expected. Denzel's words had triggered something rare in today's media: raw belief. But belief is dangerous when it touches power. Hours later, as the show replayed in different time zones, another meeting began, far away, in a boardroom where faces stayed hidden behind tinted windows. One of them spoke. "He's too influential," another said. "We warned her not to give him airtime." But it was the third voice, the quietest, that gave the final word. "Then we bury him, quietly." Back at Denzel's hotel, his phone buzzed nonstop. Agents, reporters, pastors, fans, threats, praise, confusion. Some begged him to do another interview. Others warned him not to say another word, but he ignored them all. Instead, he stared out the window at the city skyline. thinking about the woman who stood during the broadcast. Her words kept echoing in his mind. My son is here because of your faith. That's why he had spoken, not for fame, not to win a debate, but because something deep told him the truth had to be said. And someone out there needed it. But truth never walks alone. It's always followed by resistance. The next morning, the headlines twisted the story. Denzel's faith rant derails Oprah's show. Actor turned spiritual on live TV, fans divided. Oprah loses control as Denzel goes rogue. But inside the studio, something had shifted. Oprah sat in her office, watching the replay. Not the edited version, the raw feed. Every pause, every glance, every breath. She saw things she hadn't felt in the moment. Her own reactions, her discomfort, her fear. Why had she tried to corner him? Why did his faith bother her so much? A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Tasha, one of her oldest researchers, someone who had been with her since Chicago. You okay? Tasha asked. Oprah didn't answer right away. Did I cross a line? She finally asked, her voice quiet. Tasha hesitated. You asked a question, but maybe it wasn't meant for him. Oprah looked up. What do you mean? I mean, Tasha said, maybe you were asking yourself, and you just used his face. The truth stung. Oprah had spent years building her empire on truth, vulnerability, faith. But somewhere along the way, she had replaced curiosity with control, and Denzel had held up a mirror. Just then, her assistant rushed in. There's something you need to see. She handed Oprah a tablet. A video, unedited, raw, a behind-the-scenes angle someone had leaked. It showed Denzel praying backstage after the show. Not for the cameras, not for effect, just alone, kneeling by a folding chair. The caption read, "This is what faith looks like when no one's watching." It had already hit 3 million views, but even more surprising, someone had commented. Someone powerful, someone who hadn't spoken publicly in years, a former senator, retired after a corruption scandal. A man once thought lost to disgrace. He wrote, I was the one who called to silence the show. I watched the segment again, and I cried. I see now that truth doesn't need protection. It needs courage. Denzel gave it. We didn't. That comment alone went viral. The tide was turning. But while social media exploded, Hollywood did something else. They began closing in. A studio canceled Denzel's next project. An endorsement deal vanished. An email leaked from a top executive saying, we don't need another actor preaching morals. This isn't Sunday school. But Denzel, he kept walking. He accepted no interviews, made no statements. He simply attended a community center event in South Central Los Angeles, shaking hands with at-risk youth, reminding them of their worth. The press tried to follow. He told them to focus on the kids, not on him. And that's when it happened. Oprah showed up. No cameras, no makeup, no entourage. Just her. She walked into the center quietly, found Denzel in a corner with a group of boys, and waited until he finished. When he turned and saw her, he didn't speak. She did. I need to say something, Oprah said. The boys fell silent. I mocked something sacred, she continued. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I was afraid of it, afraid of what it would reveal in me. Denzel nodded slowly. Then don't mock it again, he said. Honor it, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that only comes after truth burns through pride. But across town, someone else was watching. In a high-rise office, a man in a gray suit stared at a wall of monitors. Paused on one of them was the still image of Denzel, standing beside Oprah in the community center. He made a call. He's more dangerous now than ever, he said. The voice on the other end replied, then we take it to court. On what grounds? The man asked. The reply came instantly. We'll find something. And just like that, the next chapter began, because faith had moved mountains. But now it would face a courtroom, and the trial? would shake Hollywood to its core. The envelope arrived 2 days later, thick, cream-colored. Official. It was hand-delivered to Denzel's home. No courier badge, no explanation. Just a man in a dark suit who placed it in the actor's hands without a word and walked away. Inside, a summons. Civil litigation. The claim: intentional disruption of broadcast standards, incitement of public discord, and violation of moral clause in contract. The plaintiff? Not Oprah. Not the network. But a shadow company tied to 3 major studios and a media conglomerate. The same people who greenlit his films for the last 15 years. The message was clear. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was war. Hollywood had decided to make an example out of him. If they could take down Denzel Washington, a man known for integrity, respect, and excellence, they could silence anyone. He read the summons twice, slowly, then folded it, set it on the table, and picked up the note from his mother, the one he had carried in his jacket pocket during the live interview. He ran his thumb along the edges. The ink was fading now, but the words burned brighter than ever. Stay close to God, or stay out of the spotlight. He was about to be dragged into the brightest, most brutal spotlight of his life, and this time, he wasn't acting. The media went wild. Washington to face court over explosive interview. Hollywood turns on one of its own. Oprah stays silent, for now. Social media was split. Some called it a witch hunt. Others said he had crossed a line by mixing faith with fame. But what none of them knew was that the lawsuit had nothing to do with broadcast violations. It had everything to do with fear. Fear that his words had broken through the noise. Fear that real influence didn't come from followers or press junkets, but from authenticity. And authenticity was contagious. The courtroom was packed, not just with journalists and cameras, but with energy, something electric. People whispered, craned necks, leaned forward in their chairs. Even the air felt tight, like the trial wasn't just about one man, but about something bigger. Oprah sat near the back, surrounded by her team, watching quietly. She hadn't been called to testify, not yet, but her presence was unavoidable. After all, the moment that triggered this battle had happened on her stage, and the courtroom screen kept looping it. The clip of her asking Denzel if his faith was just branding, and his calm reply, "I don't act when I pray." Every time those words echoed through the speakers, the room shifted. The prosecution painted him as unpredictable, a liability. They claimed he hijacked the platform for personal belief. They used his silence after the show against him, said it was proof of guilt, not grace. They even played clips from his older movies, edited to suggest contradictions. "Mr. Washington," the lead attorney barked during cross-examination, "isn't it true you've portrayed killers, corrupt cops, and immoral figures? And now, you expect us to believe you represent virtue?" Denzel's reply was quiet. Simple. "I play characters. I live truth." The judge raised an eyebrow. Even the stenographer paused. But the prosecution wasn't done. They brought out private emails, Denzel declining roles with violent scripts, questioning morality clauses, even requesting scenes be rewritten to reflect redemption over revenge. They thought this would hurt him. Instead, it built a new image, a man who stood for something. Even in silence, the defense began to build their case, piece by piece. They called character witnesses. Actors, directors, staffers, community leaders. People who had worked with Denzel, lived near him, served with him on charity boards. One by one, they told the same story. A man of discipline, humility, and consistency. But the moment that shook the courtroom came from a boy, 17. The same boy whose mother had spoken up during the broadcast. He took the stand nervously, hands shaking. "I was planning to end my life that week," he said. "I had it all ready. I was just tired of the darkness." Gasps swept the room. "But then I watched Mr. Washington," he continued. "He said he prays when he's broken, when no one's watching. And I thought, maybe that's enough. Maybe God hears people like me too. The courtroom fell silent. Even the prosecutor looked away. Oprah closed her eyes. And Denzel? He bowed his head again, but behind the scenes, something darker stirred. Documents leaked. Emails, contracts, meetings, all tied to a coordinated effort to silence certain voices in Hollywood. Not because they broke rules, but because they refused to play along. And Denzel's name wasn't the only one. A list appeared. Other actors, writers, directors, people who had walked away from deals after raising ethical concerns. People who were slowly removed from projects without public explanation. And at the bottom of the list was a name no one expected. Oprah Winfrey. Because the moment she aired that interview, they turned on her too. She hadn't known it at the time. But the lawsuit was also a warning to her. Stay in line, or you'll be next. The defense team presented the leaked evidence to the judge. A bombshell. Court recessed for the day. The hallway outside was chaos. Reporters shouted. Cameras rolled. Whispers echoed like thunder. And in the middle of it all, Denzel and Oprah stood face to face for the first time since the interview. "They're not just after me," he said. She nodded. "I know." "So what now?" Oprah took a breath. "We tell the whole truth." But someone wasn't ready to let that happen, because while the court was adjourned, a fire broke out in the records room. Files destroyed. Evidence gone. Arson. The news said. But Denzel knew better. Truth was being hunted. And now? They were running out of time. The fire department called it suspicious. No smoke alarms triggered. No sprinkler response. No witnesses. Just a sudden blaze in the courthouse records room at 3:13 a.m., destroying critical evidence related to the leaked Hollywood blacklist. The one with Denzel's and Oprah's names at the bottom. Officially, no one said it aloud. But everyone knew. Someone didn't want that list reaching the jury, but what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that one backup copy of the documents had survived. Not in a cloud or hard drive, but in something old-fashioned and unexpected. A notebook. Handwritten by one of the paralegals on Denzel's team, a woman named Nadia, quiet, precise, and observant. She had transcribed every key conversation from the leaked emails, every name, every date, every strategy. Not because she was told to, but because she had once been silenced herself. And she promised never again. She handed the notebook to Denzel that morning in court. "They won't expect this," she said. Denzel opened it. "Read the first few lines," and nodded. Double quotes. "Then we give them what they fear most," he said. Truth. Inside the courtroom, the energy had shifted. Tension buzzed like electricity behind the polished wood panels and marble floors. The judge, an older man with a reputation for fairness, looked tired, almost troubled. But his voice was steady. "Mr. Washington," he said, "you may continue your defense." Denzel stood. No notes, no legal jargon. Just him. "Your Honor," he began, "this case isn't about contracts. It's not about broadcast violations. It's about control. Who gets to speak? Who gets to stay silent? Who's allowed to bring their whole self into the room? And who's punished for it?" He paused. The room held still. They tried to erase the evidence, to burn it, but truth doesn't burn that easily. He held up Nadia's notebook. "This is a record. Not just of what they did to me, but what they've done to dozens of others. Names you know, stories you believed. Until they disappeared." The opposing lawyer shot up. "Your Honor, we object." "Overruled," the judge said quietly. Denzel continued. "What do you do when the system you serve is the same system that tries to silence you? What do you do when your voice becomes a threat just because it isn't for sale?" He turned toward the gallery, toward Oprah. And what happens when the people who built the platform are punished for letting someone speak freely on it? Oprah looked back at him, no longer the host, no longer the queen of daytime TV, just a woman watching a man defend something sacred. Freedom. The next witness changed everything. Nadia. She took the stand with the notebook in her lap. I used to work for one of the studios behind this case, she said. I sat in meetings where executives discussed which actors were safe and which weren't. And by safe, they meant obedient. The courtroom murmured. I heard them say Denzel Washington was getting too bold. That is imaginative reframing. They wanted him cast in morally gray roles to soften his credibility. And did Mr. Washington know any of this? The lawyer asked. No, he was never told. And why did you keep a record? Because one day I knew they'd try to erase the truth, and I didn't want to be part of that. The judge leaned forward. And you're prepared to submit this notebook into evidence? Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution looked cornered. They tried to argue handwriting wasn't admissible, that it could have been forged. But they had no counterproof. And worse, 2 studio assistants who had recently been fired came forward and confirmed Nadia's notes. The house of cards was crumbling, but as the trial tilted in Denzel's favor, a new tactic emerged. They attacked his family, paparazzi, swarmed his wife's workplace. His children's schools were leaked online. Fake rumors about infidelity, tax evasion, and past arrests filled gossip columns overnight. But none of it stuck. Because every attempt made him more human. And more people began showing up at court, not just reporters, but regular people. Pastors, veterans, teachers, former addicts, all carrying signs that read, "Truth matters. Faith is not a crime. We stand with Denzel." One moment sealed the shift in public opinion. Oprah took the stand. No lawyer summoned her. She asked to testify. I've spent decades interviewing the world's most powerful voices, she began. But that day on my show, I wasn't powerful. I was afraid. I thought challenging Denzel would make for good television. She looked directly at the jury, but it wasn't television. It was real, and he responded with grace. Not anger, not defensiveness, grace. She turned toward the judge. We all say we want truth, but when it shows up dressed in conviction, we call it dangerous. This man didn't violate any standard. He raised the bar. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge pounded his gavel. Order. But no one could unhear her words. That night, news anchors across every network ran clips of her testimony. Hashtags exploded. #TruthOnThinch. #FaithUnderFire. #We hear you, Denzel. But across the city, a final meeting was happening in a penthouse office. The studio executives, the ones who started it all, were discussing settlement. They knew they couldn't win the case, but they could still save face. Offer him a private apology. One of them said, money, a new film, make this go away quietly. But when the offer reached Denzel's legal team, his response was simple. I'm not here to settle. I'm here to finish this. The court would reconvene for closing arguments the next morning, but something else was happening behind the scenes. One of the studio execs had turned whistleblower. They had documents, real ones, contracts, payment trails, internal memos linking the lawsuit not just to silencing, but to a wider operation designed to manipulate public narratives through entertainment. And in the final envelope he handed over was something shocking, a list of actors whose careers were manufactured and others who were systematically dismantled. The first name, Denzel Washington. The second, Oprah Winfrey. And the third, a woman no one had heard from in 20 years, a woman whose disappearance from the screen was never explained, but was about to change everything. And in the final part of the trial, she would return. To reveal the darkest secret Hollywood ever buried. Her name was Miriam Keller. In the late 90s, she was everywhere. Lead roles, magazine covers, Golden Globe speeches. Her smile lit up screens. Her talent silenced rooms. And then, suddenly, she vanished. The media said she walked away to find herself. Some whispered she had mental breakdowns. Others suggested substance abuse. But the truth? No one really knew until now. She entered the courtroom through a side door. Older, now quiet, wearing no makeup, no designer label, just a pale blue blouse, and a steady gaze that held 20 years of silence. Oprah gasped when she saw her. So did several jurors. And Denzel? He nodded once, like he'd been waiting for her. The judge adjusted his glasses. Miss Keller, you understand this testimony is voluntary? Yes, Your Honor. And that you are aware of the consequences? She smiled. Not sad, not scared, just ready. I've lived with consequences for 2 decades. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. The court fell silent, and she began. 20 years ago, I was cast in a film that didn't sit right with me, she said. There was a scene, violent, unnecessary, cruel. I asked the director to cut it. I even offered to forfeit part of my salary. What happened then? The defense attorney asked. A week later, my agent dropped me. 3 offers disappeared. Overnight. A month later, a scandal surfaced about me, a false accusation. Nothing proven, but the damage was done. And did you ever return to work? No, every door shut. Why are you telling us this now? She looked directly at the jury because I heard Denzel speak. Not just on TV, but in court. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as an actress, not as a scandal, but as a person who once stood for something and lost everything. She pulled a small envelope from her bag. Inside, a letter from 2003. Addressed to one of the studio executives now under investigation. She had written it after her last film. It read, "You may silence my roles, but not my voice. One day, someone will stand where I could not. And when they do, I pray you're forced to face what you buried." The courtroom held its breath. She looked at Denzel. "You stood." He didn't say anything. He just placed his hand over his heart. The final day of the trial arrived. Cameras outside the courthouse doubled. Networks scrambled to send anchors. Hashtags trended across the globe. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The judge allowed both sides to give extended closing arguments. The prosecution tried their best. They called the trial a distraction. They said Denzel weaponized faith. They claimed the defense was cherry-picking sympathetic witnesses. But their voice had lost its sharpness, because truth, once it enters the room, does not leave quietly. Then it was Denzel's turn. He stepped forward. No paper, no lawyers. Just him. "This trial has never been about winning," he said. "It's been about revealing. We've heard from a boy who nearly gave up his life, a woman who was erased for telling the truth, and a system that believed silence was strength." He looked around the courtroom. But silence isn't strength, it's surrender. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I didn't ask to be a fight. I simply answered a question with honesty. And that honesty threatened an industry built on image. He paused. But here's the thing, images fade, truth remains. The judge leaned back, the jury leaned in. "You can end my career, blacklist my name, erase me from scripts. But you cannot remove truth from the hearts of people who saw it, who felt it. And if this courtroom decides that truth is a liability," he looked at the judge, the jury, the cameras, "then maybe it's not just Hollywood that needs saving. Maybe it's all of us." The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Outside, thousands gathered in silence, holding candles, holding signs. Inside, the tension grew by the minute. Oprah sat near the front, now. Miriam beside her. Nadia 2 rows back. They weren't celebrities anymore. They were survivors. And when the jury returned, the world held its breath. Foreman stood. A man in his 60s, calm, steady voice. "On all counts, we find the defendant not guilty." Gasps, sobs, cheers. Reporters ran for the exits, racing to broadcast the verdict. Oprah hugged Miriam tightly. Denzel stood still. Tears welled in his eyes. But he didn't break until the judge did something no one Expected. He stood. And said, "Mr. Washington, for the first time in my courtroom, I will break protocol." He stepped from the bench, walked to Denzel, and shook his hand. "Thank you for reminding us why the truth matters." The aftermath was immediate. Media giants tried to pivot. Studio executives resigned. Some were indicted. Others fled the spotlight. Oprah announced a new platform, one that would give space to unheard voices. One where questions were asked. Not to trap, but to reveal. And Miriam? She returned to the screen, not in a blockbuster, but in a small indie film written by a new director, inspired by her own story. It won an award at Sundance. Nadia was offered 5 book deals. She declined them all. Instead, she founded an initiative to protect whistleblowers in the entertainment industry. And Denzel? He went quiet, not in defeat. But in peace. He turned down films, declined interviews. And one day, he visited the boy who had once stood in court and said, "I'm alive because of you." The boy was older now, applying to college. They sat under a tree. No cameras. No scripts. Just a quiet conversation between two people whose lives were forever changed by 7 words. "I don't act when I pray, Oprah." But the story wasn't quite over, because in a studio basement, behind locked doors, sat another list. Names. Faces. Stories never told. Truths never revealed. And as the last scene fades, someone opens that door. And begins to read. The basement was quiet. Dust swirled in shafts of pale light that broke through a cracked window high on the far wall. Metal shelves lined the walls, cluttered with old tapes, film reels, and storage boxes forgotten by time. And in the center, a single table. On it sat the file. The real list. Handwritten, typed, marked with red ink and initials. A studio intern, new, unnoticed, underpaid, had stumbled across it while looking for vintage footage. She opened the file slowly, not expecting to recognize a single name. But then she saw them. Names she knew. Names she had once admired. Names that had simply disappeared. The first page read, Project Silence, initiated 2001. The second, priority targets, Washington, Winfrey, Keller. And then a final note at the bottom. If they speak, we bury them. If they resist, we rewrite them. Image is control. Truth is the threat. The intern's hands trembled. She took a photo of the document, slipped it back in place, and walked out of that basement forever. Within 48 hours, that image reached the public. And Hollywood burned. Not with fire, but with exposure. Every major media outlet ran the headline. Project Silence. The secret files that shook the industry. The world demanded answers. Studio heads were subpoenaed. Executives resigned under pressure. Producers vanished from red carpet appearances. The damage control failed, but the silence that had once ruled the entertainment industry had been broken. This time, for good. And at the center of it all was a man who never asked for the spotlight. Denzel Washington. He watched it unfold from a small theater in Detroit, where he was helping direct a local stage production for underprivileged youth. He didn't speak to reporters. Didn't single quotes to give statements. But one night, after rehearsal, a young girl, maybe 14, walked up to him and asked a question no one else had thought to ask. "Why didn't you just walk away?" He looked at her. Then said, softly, "Because walking away would have saved my image. But staying might save someone's life." Oprah's new platform launched 3 weeks later. Not a talk show. Not a network. A storytelling collective, part documentary, part testimony, where real people, silenced voices, and forgotten truths could be heard without filters or edits. Its first episode? Miriam Keller's story. Followed by Nadia's, then the boys. And finally, the full, unedited footage of Denzel's courtroom testimony. 12 million views in a week. Not one ad. No sponsor. Just truth. And a quiet message across the screen. Your voice matters, even when they try to erase it. Miriam's comeback film went on to win Best Screenplay. Nadia declined every spotlight, but secretly mentored 4 young women to enter legal media protection work. The boy? He started a nonprofit called Silent Hope, helping teens speak out when they feel invisible. Oprah? She stepped away from the spotlight for a while, not in defeat, but in reflection. She traveled, listened, healed, and when she returned, she was stronger, gentler, more honest. And Denzel? He did one final public appearance. An unscheduled, surprise guest at a university graduation. He took the podium slowly. The crowd rose in applause. He waited until the room fell silent. Then he said, "I've played kings, soldiers, detectives, pilots, even flawed heroes. But nothing is more powerful than playing yourself in a world that demands you perform." He looked across the sea of students. Your truth is your greatest role. Don't rehearse it. Don't edit it. Just live it. He stepped down. No cameras followed him, because some exits are meant to be quiet. Holy. Final. But in the hills of Los Angeles, far away from flashing lights and red carpets, there's a small cabin. Peaceful, hidden. And every Sunday morning, a man sits on the porch. Coffee in one hand, a note in the other. Faded, folded. The same one his mother wrote him decades ago. Stay close to God, or stay out of the spotlight. He reads it. Smiles, and whispers a prayer. Not for fame. Not for applause. But for courage, because in a world still ruled by image, he never stopped being real.